Okay, you crazy Mountaineers. You asked for Penn State to get back on the schedule. Well, you got it. And I'm the same way, and I'm excited today because we have somebody special. And we have a guy that knows Penn State football like very few others. And that, of course, is Coach Jay Paterno, former coach at Penn State, coached 17 years with his father, Coach Joe Pa, if I can say that. He did recruit me, so I feel like I can say that, and love saying that. And of course, Jay, hey, welcome to the Wolfman's Call. Welcome to the show, man.
Good to be here, and I'm sure that West Virginia fans of a certain age don't have real fond memories of Joe as on the opposite sideline. I had a pretty good run, but always great respect between two programs. Don Nalen and my dad were great friends. Just they really, and Bowden when he was there. I mean, it's a great close by rivalry game. Going to be a lot of fun to open the season.
Yeah, well, let's get right into what you do, Jay. And of course, you wrote a couple books. Running on a book right now. We'll get to that in a little bit. But you have the Pigskin Stew radio blog or radio show and the blog, and you're on TV, I believe, every week, the Nittany Lions with Coach Tom Bradley as well, right?
Yeah. So in the fall, we do a show called a 20-week show called Nittany Game Week, which is a TV show, and that's on. Actually, it's on in Wheeling. It's on in the Fox station in Wheeling and the Fox station in Pittsburgh, so a lot of West Virginia can get it. We do that show for 20 weeks. We do the Pigskin Stew radio show, which you are a resident WVU expert. Which the Nittany Game Week is really based on. It's a Penn State show, but Pigskin Stew is a national college football radio show where we kind of focus in on West Virginia, Pitt, and Penn State as well, and which you're on. And then I've written a couple books and working on another one, so a lot of different stuff going on. Best way to keep track of me is go to jvpaterno.com, and that's Jay, the letter V, paterno.com, and that's all that stuff's there.
Absolutely.
And I'm on the board of trustees at Penn State, so it's a lot of different stuff going on.
You got a lot of things going on under your cap, that's for sure. But I did put the picture up, Pigskin Stew, if you can imagine it. We're gonna
Looks delicious, doesn't it?
It really does. And when
tough. The football season's a little tough. There is actually a pigskin stew recipe, which I created, and you can find on the website. In fact, there is, I think, 3 pounds of meat in there, bacon, Italian sausage, some beef in there. So I mean, it's for those of you who are not vegans or vegetarians, it's a meaty stew.
Man, you have no idea how that fits down my alley. I mean,
definitely go get the recipe. Make it. I'm telling you, I will have it at a tailgate for you before the WVU game, which is at night. So we'll have all day, which could be trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what, man? That is so cool. And your book that you're currently working on now, because you were talking about it with me earlier, it sounds really cool.
Yeah, I wrote a book about my dad years ago, and just kind of the life lessons and things I learned from him, as well as some of the things that cleared up some of the misperceptions about the end of his career. But the second book was called Hot Seat. And for a number of years, I would tell people stories about recruiting and what goes on in college football and certain things. And they would say, you ought to write a book. So I started to write the book. And then I realized if I write this book using everybody's names and everything, I get myself, I'm going to need some lawyers because you're going to have some people that come back. So I wrote it as a fiction book. It basically starts out with the head coach at Ohio State loses a bowl game after losing to Michigan, and the president comes in and says, you have 1 year to win or you're done. So that book came out 3 falls ago. And since then, a lot has changed. So people have come to me and said, why don't you write one that talks about what NIL is doing and transfer portal and all that kind of stuff. So I started to gather all that, and I'm putting it all together. But the book, the one is called Hot Seat that I'm done. I don't have the title necessarily done for this one yet, but it'll be out this fall. But Hot Seat it's a lot of fun because all the stories, although it's a novel, the stories are based on things that I saw, witnessed, was part of on the recruiting trail, things we saw in terms of guys getting in trouble and doing stupid things, and the politics of the campus and all that kind of stuff. So it takes you really into some of the real meat of what goes on in big time college football.
That's actually it's really behind the scenes kind of
Yeah.
what you don't get to see. So very cool, man. Well, listen, only got one question for you, and that is, what was it like? You had 17 years of coaching with your father, obviously successful. But man, I got to imagine when you're the quarterback coach, you're the passing game offensive coordinator, and you don't score, and he looks down at you. What's it like, man? Is it stressful?
Oh well, well. The thing about Joe was great. About this was great. And what people don't realize, because everybody's caught up in stats now. It's like, oh, where do you rank in this? What do you? And his whole philosophy was this: we're going to win games on defense. We're going to have great special teams, and offensively, our goal is to take care of the football, win situations. He wasn't worried about how many points you got as long as you got enough to win the game. And he wanted to be in a position in the tough games to win the game in the fourth quarter. So we were not one of those people that was constantly looking at our stats and saying, oh, we need to get 500 yards of offense. It was, we need to not turn the ball over. We got to do well on third downs. We got to be really good in the red zone. And you're going to win those games when you do those things. And so many people get caught up in the style points. So there was a little bit different philosophy than what you have now. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, there were some tough days, but at the end of the day, we were all trying to do the same thing, trying to do what we could to win the games. And so that part was really, I wouldn't trade those. I had a couple chances to think about leaving before he retired, and I got to the point where, I said, you know what, I'm only going to get so many years of this with him, so I'm not going to leave before he retires. Now, obviously, didn't turn out exactly the way we wanted, and some things have changed, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, one of my greatest memories of my life with football is being recruited by your father and him calling me from the national championship game. It was like for 30 seconds, but it was 30 seconds, man, that I remembered for my entire life. So, I thanked him for that. And in fact, we were both 1986 to 90. You were a quarterback at Penn State and grew into a coach. And
so we're old.
Yeah, we're definitely old. Well, good. Well, let's move this on. Speaking of old, because NIL was never anything like that for us back in the day. But now as you said, you're on the Penn State Board of Trustees, and you guys are directly responsible for the NIL program. Am I right?
Yeah. About a year and a half ago, our old athletic director, Sandy Barber, was the athletic director, and there wasn't a lot going on with NIL. And I've been consulting in NIL stuff with a group that works nationally for 3.5 years now. When California passed the law, they brought me on to help them to consult. So they hired me. So I had a feel for what was going on nationally. So I went to, I got with a couple of people and said, we got to start a collective, because if we don't, nobody else will. So we started it. Now, as a trustee, I have to stay at 30,000 feet. I can't be involved on a day-to-day basis. There are a lot of things I can't do. So we got it started, got the mechanism in place, and got it going. And, it's been great to talk to people involved in other collectives and things, just to compare notes. So obviously not giving away the store as to what we're doing as to what they're doing. But, I had a conversation with Oliver Luck not too long ago about, just comparing notes as to what he's seeing nationally. Because what everybody's worried about with the collective is what is the rules nationally? What is everybody dealing with? What's the IRS going to do with the kids, what they're making, and the collectives, how they're handling it? So we're all talking about what this all looks like. So it's been great to talk to a lot of people different nationally. And I think what West Virginia is doing right now, but what we're seeing, they're doing a good, really, really good job. And I think it's part of it because a guy like Oliver Luck's involved with it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Ollie, man, I think he's taking care of West Virginia in a lot of ways. And it's good to have your foresight in there. Do you see, being that you're in the forefront of this, do you see any regulations coming down where this thing can get a little more under control?
I think it's got to happen, but right now it's a state-by-state patchwork. There's a lot of thought that Congress should do something. I think that's a mistake. Obviously, they can't even get the debt ceiling right. So how are we going to let I think that's probably a little more important than NIL right now,
Right.
Just slightly. But I think what's going to have to happen is revenue sharing is coming. The Supreme Court's going to come down the side of the athletes. It would shock me if they don't when the next case gets to them. So I think all these things are all going to come to a head at one time, and I think it'll take literally rewriting the Constitution, the NCAA, so to speak, to get this done. And I think it'll happen. But in the meantime, it's a crazy marketplace.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on, and thank you for that. But let's get into the meat. The meat is Penn State University football. Happy Valley appears to be happy again. It looks like after the season last year, 11-2, only losing to Michigan and to Ohio State. Obviously, the two big teams, and one of them in the big country. Where's Penn State at? Let's start off with the offense. I just read about Coach Franklin saying that he has an intentional way of the way they want to go about this summer workouts with the players that are going to be the key players. Let's start off with your offense.
Well, I think the biggest question is going to be quarterback. I mean, there's certainly Drew Allar came in with a lot of hype. He's a 5-star guy, whatever that means. And I can tell you, as a guy who was a recruiting coordinator for a number of years and put together some really highly rated classes, sometimes when I left Penn State, the all-time leading receiver was a guy named Deion Butler, who was a walk-on, and who ended up getting drafted and played in the NFL. So, I mean, those rankings, they mean something on February on signing day for all that. But, it's a friend of mine raised hunting dogs for a long time, and he'd say, Jay, you can have the best dog with the best pedigree and everything, but until you take him out and shoot the gun and get a rabbit, you don't know what you got. Because sometimes some dogs, when the gun goes off, they hide behind your leg, and others go chasing the rabbit. So it's going to come down to see what Drew Allar does in terms of chasing the rabbits when the gun goes off Saturday night in September when West Virginia's at Penn State. I think that's the number one thing. I think running back, really, really good with Nick Singleton. A lot of people don't talk about Katron Allen, the co-freshman with him. I think Katron Allen gives you a couple things that Singleton doesn't in terms of the pass game. Those two guys are really good. The offensive line, they're talking about it being pretty good for them. They've got a left tackle who everybody, Oli Fashionow, everybody thinks is really a top prospect and, maybe a first rounder and could have gone last year, but he's only 19 years old, 20 years old, young guy. I think he made the right decision because it's going to be a lot different blocking guys in college than Von Miller, potentially, guys like that are 27, 28 years old, like the two kids who played Ohio State, Bosa's, those kind of guys. So he made the right choice. I think the biggest question for them is going to be wide receiver. They just have not seemed to have that guy last year that they could hang their hat on, a number one or number two guy. That's going to be a question mark. I think, but it's going to come down to how well, if Allar is the guy at quarterback. He's not a mobile guy like they've had with Trace McSorley and then they had with Sean Clifford. So the guys around him have to be better, because he's not going to get you out of some trouble like the other guys could. If it's 3rd and 10 and the left tackle whiffs, you're punting. Whereas with Clifford or with guys they've had in the past, they might be able to extend the play and get you some. So that'll be what I'm going to be looking for Saturday night when they play West Virginia.
Do you find it interesting that, say, Drew Allar, that he's a 5-star, but he's not mobile to like other quarterbacks? I mean, that he actually got that 5-star ranking.
Yeah, I think there's two schools of thoughts. People like the big strong arm guy that's in the pocket, throws the ball around. But if you look at the NFL right now, it's a throwback to taking you back a number of years, because if you look at where the game is going, you look at the first 4 or 5 guys taken in the draft at quarterback this year, they're all mobile guys. And I think everybody's realized those guys that can extend the play and throw the ball downfield are so valuable, because if you do, it covers up a lot of sins with your offensive line. And I've always been a guy the last number of years of my career. I liked those guys that were mobile, and we had some guys that were Big Ten MVPs at quarterback, and they were both mobile guys that could make some things happen. If you look at Ohio State, you look at some of those guys. Now you look at Michigan; they're more of a drop back type offense, and they've had success running the football, but they've been very good in the offensive line. So it's going to be curious to see what happens there. And I think, I forgot, one of the things I forgot talking about the offense, the tight end position has been a pretty good strength for Penn State as well. So they got a chance to be good offensively, but it's going to come down to, the guy under center. How good can he be? How soon can he be that good?
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously, and especially in today's day and age, although I'm not sure with Penn State because he still loved to run the ball. I mean, he had 2,000-yard running backs last year.
I think they were both in the 980 range.
980, okay, close to
I
it.
mean, close enough, yeah.
Yeah. So where I mean, you still love I still love that football, old school like you are, like I am. It's still fun to watch, controlling the line of scrimmage. Now, speaking of that, let's flip it over to the defense. I also read that Coach Franklin said that after the spring game, he's still looking a little more competition at the defensive tackle position, but otherwise, it seems to me like the defense is kind of pretty good. Top five rankings preseason.
Yeah, I think they've got a kid named Abdul Carter, at linebacker, who I think can really, really be something special. He's a big guy, can run. The question is going to be, as you alluded to with Coach Franklin, is going to be up front, because the games that they struggled last year. I mean, Michigan took the ball and just ran for 400 yards, and they just were not big enough up front. And I think what Michigan has done in this league is they went from where everybody was getting into the spread stuff. And Harbaugh finally said, you know what, this is what I am. This is what I know how to do. I'm going to get an offensive line. I'm going to control the game. And I think everybody adjusted to Ohio State's offense and got a little bit smaller up front, a little smaller linebacker, got a lot of nickel backs, a lot of defensive backs on the field. And Michigan said, okay, you got those defensive backs in the field. Let's see how they handle a 320-pound pulling guard on them. On the perimeter. And you know how corners are. The corners are there usually because they can't tackle, and safeties are safeties because they can't cover as well as corners. So, Michigan's figured out this is what we're going to be. So I think that's going to be the big question for Penn State is, can they hold up front against teams that want to run the football? And I think that's number one. I think in the secondary, they've recruited really well. They've been deep. They lose Joey Porter Jr. to the Steelers. The kid named King at corner. Some people think he'll be better. He's not as big as Porter was. He's a 5'11" guy, maybe. The kid named Keaton Ellis, who's from State College, who I've known for, he's the same age as my son. Known him a long time. He's a guy in the secondary that can do some things at safety. So it's going to be, they'll have good enough guys at each level. The question is, can they stay healthy and be deep enough?
Yeah, which is the question for every team every year. Can you stay healthy? And so go the rewards, right? If you are, you're pretty good usually. Well, okay, so then that's a pretty good team. You seem pretty fired up. Is Penn State getting back to where they're supposed to be in your mind? Have they dropped before? Not last year, obviously they were very successful, but consistently. Are they getting back to that top five team consistently?
I think the next 2 years are going to tell the tale, because the hype about what they've recruited, is it going to match? Is the performance going to match? Can they catch Ohio State and Michigan? If you look at it, Ohio State, really, in 2011 was the last year I was here. We beat Ohio State out there, and since then they've beaten them one time. So Ohio State's had their number. They got to get them. And Michigan has, they were splitting with Michigan in games for a few years in there, and now Michigan, with the difference in philosophy and the way they're playing offensively, has been a little different. So it'll be curious to see if they can get those two teams, because as great as the season was last year, win the Rose Bowl, they were third in their division, and that's and now you're going to add USC and UCLA in the mix next year. This might be the year you got to try and grab something, because it's going to be tough for anybody. Now, with the playoff going to 12 teams, that changes things and makes it a little bit easier to get in the playoff. But, this would be the last chance they have to get into a 14 playoff. But, I think the big question is going to be, as it relates to Ohio State, is their quarterback going to be good enough to do some of the things they've had, because they've had great quarterback play. But can Penn State catch those guys? And they get a crossover game with Iowa in week 4. So and they have Illinois early on in the season, and Illinois has gotten a lot better. So the 2 crossover games are going to be tougher than they've been. So it's going to be an interesting season to see how this one all unfolds. But the next 2 years, I think, are really going to tell the tale.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I just open up another question in my mind, and since I have you here, I hope you don't mind. But
no, not at all.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit of what's your foresight into realignment. What do you think is happening now across the nation? Where do you see it going?
I hope we can sit tight for a little while. If you said to me, you can settle this whole thing no matter what, if they made me king of college football, I would start out by saying, number one, to the Big Ten, the SEC, you're being greedy. Because all anybody seems to think is the more money you get from TV, the better you're going to be, and there's some truth to that because you have some resources.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the early '80s, when the entire TV contract structure changed, a number of these conferences got together, created some national packages, and the money was much more even, like the NFL is. You don't see the NFC East doing their own deal in the NFL, and they're having all this extra money to go spend on players and facilities and coaches. So, I mean, the ideal thing would be for the television money to be nationalized, and that levels the playing field, and then USC and UCLA can go back into the Pac-12 where they belong. Ohio State and Oklahoma, or not Ohio State, Oklahoma and Texas can go back to the Big 10 or 12, whatever it is, Big 12, where they belong, and get back to what matters. And teams like Penn State can play Pitt and West Virginia on a much more regular basis. But that's not going to happen, unfortunately. That's not going to happen. But that's what should be. So as long as there's this imbalance in the television stuff, people are always going to be willing to jump around. And I think you look at the Pac-10, it's the Pac-10 now, but it was Pac-12. It'll be the Pac-12, whatever it is. You're old enough to remember the Pac-8 like I do. Then it was the Pac-10, that's Pac-12. But what are they going to do TV wise? What's the Big 12? How's the Big 12 going to end this up? Now, I think it's good for West Virginia that Cincinnati's now in the Big 12, so they've got a team that's nearby. UCF is in the Big 12, so that gives them games in Florida, that recruit in Florida more so than maybe they have. I think the Big 12 certainly came out of this better than the Pac-12 did.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so moving on to the last question. What is the mystique about playing a Penn State team in Happy Valley at State College? Because there is a mystique. I played it. I go in there. I tell you what, twice we almost beat you. Twice. And you guys have pulled it out. And I'm probably still not over it yet. But regardless, it's an amazing place to play. I think it was 87,000, 85,000 back then.
Yeah.
I played. Now it's what's it hold now? I don't even know.
107. There'll probably be 108,000 people there opening night. But I know the two games you're talking about. In '87, Blair Thomas just he was carrying guys on his back at our place. 80. No, that was, what was that?
87, 89.
87. 88, you got us real bad down there. That was one of the two times Joe lost you guys. And then 89 was just a great defensive football game against Major Harris. I mean, he just was such a talent. But I think the thing about this is, when I was a kid, I knew kids that scalped tickets back before StubHub, and they loved they made more money on West Virginia games than anyone else, because literally thousands of West Virginia fans would show up without tickets and pay whatever they had to get in there. And it was a lot of fun, and those games were great. And it's going to be a lot of fun to have a night game. NBC is kicking off their entire Big Ten TV package with that. So it's going to be a lot of hype. We're doing what they call I think it's the helmet stripe game, where the entire stadium's in white except there's a blue stripe down the middle. Okay. So it'll be close to a whiteout for West Virginia. It'll be a lot of fun. The tailgating is going to be all day. It's Labor Day weekend, so nobody has to go to work on Monday, so people can recover for 48 hours. I think it's going to be an incredible environment. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to play these games. And for people a certain age, there's a lot of memories about some great games and great matchups, and the drive down there. I mean, it's close. It's nice to play people close. That are close by, because their fans show up, and it'll be a fun weekend at State College for people.
There's no doubt about it. Just remember one thing, Mountaineer fans. Coach Joe Paterno wanted a Big East League. He wanted it, and Pitt screwed it.
Yes, so we're all united. That's all Pitt's fault. Yes,
it's all
Syracuse blew
it. Definitely. All right.
If you look at the TV markets right now. Because at that time, there were 7 teams. It was going to be BC, Rutgers, Temple, Penn State, Pitt, West Virginia, Syracuse. And then Maryland was probably going to jump from the ACC to get in it. And then, at that point, Virginia Tech probably would have joined. I mean, we probably would have had it would have turned into a really, really good all-sports league. and they wanted Big East basketball, and they jumped, and so Penn State joined the Big Ten, and that said back in '89 it was announced, and that set all the dominoes for what we've seen in the TV stuff now, what we've seen even now all these years later, 34 years later.
Yeah, no doubt. No matter what, TV would have taken over, and this would have happened regardless to some degree. Jay Paterno, listen, what's your Twitter? What's your following? Your website again, so we get your books.
At jvpaterno.com. That's JAY, the letter V, paterno.com. I'm on Twitter at Jay Paterno. My name, JAY Paterno, spelled out. And I think on Instagram at JV Paterno. So I'm on all those things, all that fun stuff.
We're doing the radio show again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you better be ready, and you better be ready for a road trip up to Happy Valley week 1.
It's coming, and I'm going to be ready to go for the Mountaineers, baby. All right, Coach Jay Paterno, thanks so much, man, and appreciate your time, and best wishes enjoy your summer.
Same to you. Thanks, man. Great talking to you.